Hey, good people, it's me, Angela. I wanted to get on here and do a power quick 2 to 3 minutes on something I studied today. I am studying the Promised Land and the children of Israel and Moses and Aaron and Joshua. I've been on this for a couple weeks, also with 1 Peter 5. Anyways, I got on there today. I'm studying Numbers 20, man, verses 6 through 10, where God gives Moses and Aaron specific instructions. The Bible says that Moses and Aaron lay on their face and the glory of the Lord shows up. And he gives Moses, he speaks directly to Moses, but Aaron is still there. And he tells him, hey, I want you to speak to the rock and water will pour out, because the children of Israel were murmuring that they needed water to drink and water for their cattle. And so God gives those instructions. You fast forward, you go to verse 10, and the Bible says that Moses calls the people rebellious. And then he says, him and Aaron, are going to bring water to the people. Do you want us to bring water to the people? Then he raises his arm and he strikes the rock. And the Bible says that water began to gush out. I want you to read that story and think about it. And this is what God shared with me. He said, be careful of the people that you draw close in this season, Angela, because if you're not careful, they could be your demise or they could be a distraction for you. For Aaron, he was close to Moses, but he was always following the people. He had an issue with always trying to please the people. And when Aaron actually did something, it was because Moses told him to do something, which was the will of God. Most of the time, though, Aaron was always just following the people. So when he was on his face, he didn't realize that as a priest, he was held accountable for hearing the voice of God. And so when Moses decided to do his own thing, Aaron had free will and free choice to make a decision to say, no, Moses, that is not what God said. But because he was willing to just go along with what Moses did, it caused him not to even see the promise land. And so we find Aaron, he didn't even see the promised land. But then we look at Moses. I believe that Moses dealt with a spirit of rejection. One, he had already dealt with it when he was in Egypt, but he dealt with a spirit of rejection in the wilderness. Why do I say that? Because we constantly see the people in opposition against Moses. They're murmuring, they're complaining, they're going against Moses. And I believe that Moses was struggling with the spirit of rejection. And so he had been meditating on what the people were saying and how they were coming up against him. Why do I say that? The Bible says in verse 10, he called them a rebellious people. Hold on, Moses. There's nowhere where God told Moses to check the people, but Moses calls them a rebellious people. And I believe the only way he can call them rebellious is he had to be meditating on it. Why do I say that? The Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. So Moses had to be meditating on that those people were rebellious and they were complaining and they were murmuring and they were coming up against him. And so Moses took it upon himself to check the people. He calls them rebellious when God didn't tell him to check people. He then turns around and says, him and Aaron, could bring water up out of the rock. Hold on, Moses. It's not you, it's God. God told you to speak to the rock. And so we see Moses brings the attention back on himself. I feel like he was dealing with the spirit of rejection because all of a sudden he feels the need to tell the people who he is. He feels the need to be like, you can't hear from God unless it's me going to God on your behalf. And so he felt justified in pointing the people to himself. And that was not the will of God, because God then comes around and that one mistake that Moses made caused him not to enter the promised land. And God tells him, you did not trust me, Moses. You did not honor me as holy before the people. So all this time, Moses had been pointing the people to God. He had been telling them, this is what God said. But in this one instance, Moses decides to put the attention on himself and calls them a rebellious people, man. That one mistake that Moses made cost him the promised land, cost him a land that was flowing with milk and honey, cost him a land that had giant grapes. He missed it because of him deciding to operate in his flesh, operate in his emotions, point the people to himself. He got cocky and it caused him to miss the promise. And man, in this season, you want to be very careful of who you pull close to you. You want to be very careful as to who you put in your inner circle. You want to be very careful as to who you start trying to help and who you're always there for. You want to be careful of that. Why? Because because those people can be your demise. Those people can cause you to miss your promised land, miss your purpose, miss your destiny. We can't help everybody. I am that person. I will try to help everyone, but I'm learning in this season I need to be very careful as to who I help and make sure I'm being led by the Spirit of God. I have to be very careful as to who I pull close, because the enemy is just looking for someone that has a foothold. If he can't get to me, he'll try to get to me through people. And so I have to be very careful as to who I draw in. The other thing I want to tell you in reading this story is that we have to value our ability to hear the voice of God. Moses was constantly hearing the voice of God, but it got to a point that in one moment he let his anger take over and he forgot how valuable it was to hear and obey the voice of God. We have to be very careful as to not valuing the voice of God. If you are a person who hears God speak, you got to value that above people. Listen to me. You have to value that above people, because if anyone starts getting in the way of your purpose, or if anyone starts getting in a way of causing you to miss God or disobey God, or pulls you away from doing what God called you to be and do in this season, they are not good for you. Run from them, because they can become your demise. God bless you guys. Hope you have a great night. Until next time, peace.